Lionel, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Tony?
You can turn off. We usually turn off our cameras so we don't.
Yeah,
we strain our internet or whatever.
Is that why we do it?
Well, you mute your camera and then we don't see the guests doing all the eye rolls when we ask questions like, are these two clowns for real? Because that throws us off our game. I mean, there's times that I can't do anything for the rest of the day after a show because it's like, when that guest was literally falling back in his chair, shaking his head.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew we'd lost it then, that the show was over.
I find these shows to be just exhausting.
Oh, it's it's like being an air traffic controller in a lot of ways, I think.
It is. Using the ILS, instrument landing. What does the S stand for? I don't do acronyms.
I don't know what it is, yeah.
Instrument landing something. System, probably.
It's probably system, yeah. Or service, or yeah.
Runway 24L.
Yeah.
I wonder if our buddy, the official flight attendant of the AML network, I wonder if she's out on a plane landing on runway left 24L or 32R or wherever. And my friend who's a commercial airline pilot, Bill Pullen, good guy, been flying since he was like 5 years old. His dad was a test pilot for de Havilland Aircraft. And his dad had a bush, for fun. In the summer, they had a bush plane business, and this guy could fly a brick if you put wings on it.
Wow.
And he's an old time flyer, and he's only like in his early 50s.
Wow.
Chris, you got to stop breathing, buddy. There's no breathing. Okay. There's no breathing on this show. Move it back. Move the microphone out at 1/32 of an inch because we can hear you breathing again. There's no.
How's about now?
That's fine. There is absolutely no breathing allowed on the AML network.
And my breath. Yeah, it's only 90 minutes. I mean,
yeah.
So, I mean, if Olympic divers can do it, come on. This is model railroading, folks. Yeah.
Now, what was the story I was telling about my friend Bill Pullen, the commercial airline pilot?
Is he the one that landed that plane in Salt Lake with Karen Black in 1975?
That's the one. That's the guy.
Have you come to terms with the ending of that picture? I know that you were very disgruntled with the end of Airport 1975, and I don't know why.
Well, because it's actually a very watchable movie. It was as one of the critics said, it was a TV movie that ended up on the big screen. But in reality, it was a very watchable movie until he finally gets into the cockpit, and the last 15 minutes of the show are him landing the plane. And it's kind of like, the hydraulics are fine, the brakes are fine, the flaps are working, the aileron's working, everything's working except there's a hole in the cockpit, and he just lands the plane like as if it's flight 739 to Salt Lake from Dallas, coming in on a regular stop, and it's like couldn't it have been like he gets in the cockpit, and he says okay, he turns to Karen Black, whatever her her character's name was, and he turns to her and he says, "Okay, honey, we got it," because they had a thing going, of course.
Right. Oh yeah. And but troubled, as in disaster movies, you always have. There's a strain on their relationship.
Yes, it's a strained relationship, absolutely, because he can't commit.
Right.
Because he was Charlton Heston. He was too cool to commit.
Yeah.
I mean, anyways, he turns to the Karen Black character and says, "Okay, honey, we got to test all the systems to make sure you land." And, he tests one or two, and then the next thing he tests is like, oh, my God, all the hydraulics are gone from the left side of the plane.
See, that's serious. And he says he can't tell if the landing gear's down. I think you maybe need to go back and watch the last reel of that one again.
No, but he doesn't say that the hydraulic. It's just that he can't tell the landing gear. There's a little bulb on the dash that doesn't come on. But other than that, the hydraulics are all there. Everything's there. The plane's working flawlessly, except for a bulb on the dash is out. And it's kind of like, why couldn't the hydraulics for the left side of the plane been out? And he's like, he's got to circle and he's got to bring it in. He's got to, he's got to work the left side engines at 50% and the right side at 100%. And then he's got to do some old Air Force trick that he knows to get the plane to land. There's none of that. He just lands the plane.
Okay. I mean, yeah, maybe the service engine soon light on the dash a little more intense.
Yeah.
I mean, after sucking Roy Finesse out of the plane with the midair collision, I guess, yeah, service engine soon light to kind of wrap it up is, we'll get that looked at Midas when we get back up.
Yeah, exactly. We needed a little something in the last 15 minutes.
Yeah. Sorry.
And,
yeah. Still a fun picture, though.
Great movie. Which brings us to our next guest.
Oh, does it now?
It's the perfect segue for our next guest. This fella, his name is Chris Palmieri. Chris, is that? By the way, this is Tony Cook, the editor of MRN News, the co-editor of HO Collector Quarterly, and the new managing editor of Diesel Era magazine.
Hello, everybody. This is the sound of my voice.
Yeah. Now, how's that Diesel Era thing coming?
It's very exciting. I've been working on GP38s for an edition. So I have a number of people that I'm working with on various projects, and that's one of the first ones that I started tackling.
I have a comment that I've been wanting to say to you about this. Now it's been, the announcement was a couple of months ago now that White River Productions acquired Diesel Era, but I have a question, a comment that I've been wanting to say to you, but I've been very concerned that I would offend you somehow.
Well, yes, the magazines are available in Canada. I wasn't thrilled about it, but they told me there's a lot of model railroaders in Canada, especially the Toronto area. I said, they're all busy at Tim Hortons all day talking about hockey. So, but we're going to go ahead and it is available in Canada.
My comment was Diesel Era seems to be like a really high quality publication right out of the box. So when you guys buy a magazine, like does that help push the sale forward because it's already a very good, a very well put together magazine, and you guys just needed to kind of pick it up and start running with it and make small changes as you go along? There's no major changes to be made. Is that part of the appeal?
Exactly. I mean, what Paul Withers had done in a quarter century back to the 90s with Diesel Era had developed and made that brand and reputation for what that magazine delivers. And so, it was one that I had talked about with the president of White River Productions, Kevin U. Daly, many times, saying, boy, I'd love it if we could get Diesel Era. I think it'd be a fantastic magazine. And Paul is, he's still on board and doing things with us. But, was just looking for somebody to kind of take the daily work as well as, I think a lot of these, it's a great idea, but distributing the magazine and the subscriptions and kind of the nuts and bolts, we do that kind of stuff. And then that allows those people to have more fun and be more on the creative side and not be answering, hey, my dog ate the cover off my issue before I could get it in the house. Can I have another, that. Yeah.
You got a lot of exciting stuff. We got to have we're going to have to do like a half an hour just about all the exciting stuff that's happening with you and White River Productions. I know. Well, we'll get back to that on another day. So right now, Chris, come on into the studio here, buddy. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Is it Chris?
Yes, Palmieri. I get called quite a few different things, and you've done exceptional with it.
Oh. Now, when you get called quite a few different things, have you done something that warranted that? Because I get called quite a few different things, and usually when I reflect back, it's kind of my own fault.
Well, usually when that's the scenario, it's more the inflection of what I'm called than actually what I'm called.
There you go. I'll make a note of that to see in the future.
Pay attention to how it sounds.
How it sounds. Okay. All right.
So Chris has got, I was telling Tony, I was telling you a little bit earlier, but Chris has got this really cool idea, and his business is going to be called Home Shops. And basically what he's going to be doing is selling freight cars of freelanced home model railroads. Is that about it, Chris?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I've been a modeler all my life pretty much, and a freelance modeler off and on, and that's kind of where I've gravitated towards. And I belong to a number of really, really great freelance model railroad groups on Facebook, and I'm watching the interest develop, and I see a lot of things and a lot of concepts that I think, I'd sure like to have some cars for this railroad in my own collection. And it looks to me like there is a void on the supply side of that developing market. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and see if that market's really there.
What an exciting thing to do. And that is an old kind of thing that I can remember in the past, isn't it, Chris? That guys that would have home roads would decal, and it's almost like exchanging cars as if you were real railroads. And
Correct.
you'd have, so yeah, that's a neat thing. And what do you think on home roads? I have people tell me that, well, because there's so many road specific things now, that the real concept of a home road back in the day was, well, with what's available, like in HO diesels, nothing matches anything really prototypically without a lot of work. So guys would make home roads to be able to get around the fact that, well, what are you going to do with that high hood Jeep 38 if you're not an NW modeler? But where do you see home roads in contemporary times? Are they still something that has a big allure to them?
I think probably more so now than before, just because of the variety of equipment. I think it means something different to everybody as far as what interests them. In the current environment, as the number of prototype railroads are becoming fewer and fewer, if you want to model something that you see, well, you're going to get a yellow and gray Gevo or an orange Gevo or a black Gevo, and that's about it, So I think that there are more and more people who are going to become bored with the current prototype offerings, and that makes freelancing more appealing, I do believe.
So I hadn't thought of that. That is, yeah, it very much so.
And so what do you model yourself then?
I've morphed over time, but currently I have my own freelance railroads that I've based loosely on what the Mid-South and the KCS did territorially with the line between Meridian, Mississippi, and Jackson and Vicksburg and Shreveport and Dallas. The prototype concept of that has always fascinated me, but I decided to incorporate that into my own freelance story, which I loosely call my Meridian Speedway. And it's got a couple of very specific prototype railroads. And I have a website that I've had for, I don't know, maybe 6 years, where I've developed and advertised the concept, digitally, which is another thing that our current age of social media allows us to do. We can come up with a concept and display it and pick pieces of it online without necessarily having the brick and mortar railroad in our basement. So, the opportunities to share now are greater than ever before, generating interest. But I call my railroads the Texas and Great Northern and the Natchez Trace and Orient. And, as I decided I wanted to go the freelance route solidly, there's a lot of things to consider. What kind of a roster are you going to have for locomotives and cars? How big is it going to be? What is the paint scheme going to look like? How is the railroad going to operate? Where does it operate? And putting together all of these pieces, to me, is just as entertaining and challenging as the modeling itself. So,
so you said do you have a Facebook page for your railroad, or?
I don't have a Facebook page. I've got a website on Meridian Speedway. It's a Weebly website, and I have a blog there, and I share my blog posts and things that I'm doing there on Facebook groups like Freelance Model Railroading, and there's a group called Freelance Model Railroading in the Prototype World. So I will be creating Facebook groups moving forward specific to that. But if you go to one of the general Freelance Model Railroad Facebook groups and you search for My Railroad, people are more likely to find that than if they need to know that they need to be directed towards a specific site.
So what's the URL for your site?
It is meridianspeedway.weebly.com. And now that I'm doing this, I think I'm going to go ahead and buy the domain meridianspeedway.net. .com is not available, just to make it easier, because I think I'm going to be directing more traffic to the site.
And I noticed it says Kansas Pacific, and there's like a logo with a longhorn steer, says Kansas Pacific Railroad. You've got a herald and everything. And part of that, from my end of things doing magazines, I find that now is as much fun and part of my hobby as what I do digitally. the stuff, whether it's photography or creating the stuff. I have as much fun like doing a review and laying the stuff out and getting the pictures. That's become part of my hobby, which is an interesting thing. I've joked with my assistant editor. I said, can I get an MMR in Adobe work? That, that's kind of where I find I do a lot of my hobby now. And I can see from your web, now it says Kansas Pacific Anthony Lorch.
Correct. So you're looking at a page on my website where I have put content for other railroads that my railroad interacts with.
Oh, okay.
So the Kansas Pacific is Anthony Lorch's, and a lot of the design and image concept was done by a fellow named Hank Stevens, who I think is extremely talented. And I probably joined Facebook, I would say, around 2015 and started looking at the Facebook groups. And at that time, the Kansas Pacific and Anthony and Hank, they were very prolific posting things. And when I saw some of that equipment, it just the way it was presented and the way it looked, it got my attention. And it's become one of my favorites. And as I got to talking to those gentlemen a little bit more about the railroad and looked at the system map, it actually was a nice fit in with the Meridian Speedway network. And I thought, there's potential here to have trains run through. I could see a grain train originating in Kansas on the Kansas Pacific with Kansas Pacific equipment running through to my railroad at Tulsa or Fort Worth and going to an export facility at Houston or Gulfport or something like that. And it's just, growing up and beginning my rail fanning in the 80s and the 90s in the pre-internet era, I would remember going trackside and looking at trains and being intrigued or delighted by something I saw on that train for the first time. I mean, the number of railroads out there were many. And, I would see a boxcar belonging to a railroad in the Northeast or the Pacific Northwest or California that I had never heard of. And there was no, you pull out your cell phone and go to Railroad Picture Archives or just Google the name of that railroad and there's all the content there. So I remember, the feeling of intrigue and delight when you see something for the first time. And when I see something presented on a freelance page and I have that same feeling of, hey, that's pretty cool. That looks like that fits into my world and I'd like to learn more about it. That's the appeal that I think social media is introducing a lot of people to. And, I'm not going to go trackside and see another GATX tank car and think, man, that's really something I want to dig into. But I might go to a model railroad and see a grain train with some Kansas Pacific hoppers that are well done and look good and think that this is interesting. I'd like to learn a little bit more about what this concept is.
So before we go on, we'll just mention that Chris actually, as his full-time real job, works as a train dispatcher for a railroad in the United States of America.
That is an accurate and fair statement, yes, sir. I get my fill of prototype one-to-one railroading with my day job. And to your question earlier about what railroad interests me the most, or how this is morphed into the therapy that is the hobby. Once upon a time, I decided I was going to be a rivet counter modeler for a specific railroad that appealed to me. And some of that luster goes away when you work for that railroad or one of its successors. And for me, being able to do the freelance route as I came back into the hobby, I get to sit here and say, I'm going to run this railroad the way I would like to run my railroad and have it look the way I want and, have some of the concepts the way I want. And that's been a lot of the appeal and therapy for me. That is the freelance aspect of railroading.
And I noticed that you label it. I mean, I think Lionel and I both know the old freelance railroad label,
Mm-hmm.
The classics like V&O and of course, Gory and Defeated and, Virginian and Ohio. You say, though, proto freelance. And I think I have an idea of that. How would you define that versus a freelance railroad?
Well, I think I've looked up that definition several times myself on different groups, and there are varying definitions. So here's how I'm going to answer that. Every modeler has to take some sort of artistic license with whatever they model. Because for starters, if you're going to model the Norfolk Southern, this subdivision, this town, this location, well, your models are smaller than a prototype, and you've got to do some selective compression. But you're going to be as true to how do, with the space I have, make make the visitor feel like they're stepping into this place in time and looking at this part of the Norfolk Southern. So you're taking some variables and adjusting them to make it fit into your garage or world. And I think as people decide what they want to model, they're going to imagine, if you will, the control panel or dashboard for your model railroad having a bunch of sliding levers. You're going to adjust things more to get it to fit. So at some point, you've adjusted enough of the story variables that you're no longer, a specific prototype modeler. But there's enough of it. Maybe I still have the Norfolk Southern in this town and it runs just like it does, but it interchanges with my railroad. You're going from prototype to prototype with a little more freelance into it. And sometimes you adjust those variables all the way to where there is nothing resembling anything prototype in the world that you've painted. And I think of that as more strictly freelance. So probably different people would look at what I've created with my Meridian Speedway, and some people might say, this is entirely freelance. Some people might say it's proto-freelance, depending upon how they feel about that definition. But I do interact with, or these railroads do interact with prototype railroads, and the way, the blocking schemes for cars and the way traffic flows, I think is very prototypical. So I coined it proto-freelance, but perhaps it's freelance. It's open to interpretation.
It's great. You have a great website here. So it's meridianspeedway.weebly.com. And if you change that, let us know. I'll put that URL in the write-up when we publish this particular podcast. But I mean, this is a fabulous website you've built here. Now, do you actually have a layout?
I actually do not have a layout.
Wow. I didn't realize that. Your website, I thought this guy must have a massive layout.
So to my point, about what does social media and digital sharing offer today? You can create the illusion and the image of a railroad, and all railroads really are like a stage for a play, whether it's brick and mortar or digital. And a visitor can come to the model railroad website and spend some time perusing some of the pages and look at the train schedules and see some of the photographs. And I would like to think that person can come away from that experience with a greater feeling for what this railroad is and what it would be like than maybe if they stepped into someone's basement and just saw a little piece that was limited to that person's modeling abilities. And for a lot of the images on this website, there was, he's now deceased, a model railroader named Jim Norwood in the area where I live. And he had a very elaborate KCS railroad. And I asked him if he would mind if I brought my equipment to his layout for some photo shoots, and he was all about it. So a lot of the stock images I have on this website are pictures that were taken maybe a decade ago on that layout.
So that's fascinating, because that's a great, actually, Tony, if you think about it, that's another way to really enjoy the hobby. You could build a whole roster of locomotives and cars and everything, and create a website and the whole 9 yards, and have photos and the whole thing, and be able to enjoy the hobby. If you live in an apartment, or you live in a small home or whatever, or you've got a young family and you don't have any room in your home, it's a great way to enjoy the hobby without having it overtake a large section of your home.
Indeed. Yeah. Virtual, but real at the same time.
Yeah. Virtually real.
Virtually real.
That doesn't mean that I don't have the intention of, at some point in time, doing this in a real railroad. I live in a part of the country that does not have basements, so it's a little bit more difficult to do kind of what I want to do. But when I created this website, the intent was, when I do immerse somebody or invite somebody to take a look at this railroad, there needs to be some place where I can direct them so that they can get kind of a feel for what it is that they're looking at, since I don't have that brick and mortar railroad. So I've got a tab on here with all the train symbols and the route maps and everything else. And what you were looking at was a page where I called it my railroads in network, I guess, where these are other freelance railroads that I brought into my world. And there's a lot more than what I put on this railroad. And those are going to be evidenced in some of the home shops offerings coming forward.
I think this is a fabulous idea, though. I mean, and the other thing you could do, you could be somebody that belongs to a Fremo group, have a couple of modules, and have a place to, a place to go run your trains when Fremo sets up and stuff, like they did there a month or two ago with Spring Creek model trains there in Deschler. Is it Deschler or
Deschler.
Deschler.
Yeah.
About 25 miles from
Strang, Nebraska, and Bubba's Anytime Cafe that serves the official Strang burger.
I think Lionel should serve the Strange Burger on this show.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so let's get into this because our buddy Matt Martin put me in contact with you, and he suggested that I talk, and then we talked a little bit. And what exactly is it? You're starting a company called Home Shops, and what is the theory behind this now?
Behind the name or the actual concept?
Well, no, like what is it? Yeah, what is it you're going to do? What is it you're going to be selling? It's a retail site. You're going to be selling a product, and what exactly is it?
Correct. It'll be online retailing. I'm not planning on having a brick and mortar store. And the major impacting decisions or things that I saw that made me decide to launch this were on these freelance Facebook pages, which are easy to search and find. A number of people are having custom AccuRail runs done of cars in their freelance road names. One fellow by the name of Patrick Harris is on there, whom I got to meet in person in the 90s. We both lived in New Orleans at the same time. He's on there now, and he does a run every month or two, and his cars sell out. And this last one, he did a batch of Archer railroad cars, and they sold out in 20 hours, the run that he did. So, excuse me, every time I see...
Sold out in what?
20 hours.
Wow.
How many cars did he do?
It's not that many. I think he did 80 for that particular run, but I'm not for sure how many he did.
All right. Time out here. What is the main page that you go to on Facebook for freelance?
The one with the most people is just called Freelance Model Railroads.
Okay.
And I think it's got something like 3,700 people. And there's another one called Freelance Model Railroading in a Prototype World.
Have you ever listened to the podcast?
Occasionally. I've listened to a few of them recently to kind of just, get a feel for what's going on here.
Yeah. What do you think so far?
I enjoy it, actually. Personally, mentally, I don't know that I have the attention span to follow an entire episode, for the simple fact that I thought, I'm painting up some cars for this. I'm going to decal some cars. And I listened to Dave Lellback's interview while I was doing it. And I think maybe 15 or 20 times I had to put the car down. And I said, what did he just say? And I rolled over to the computer and rewound it and paid attention. But it's wonderful that this content and these conversations are out there. I think I may have one crooked letter on my car because of it. But it's you had a couple of young modelers, one of whom was doing Crawford Hill. Excuse me.
Yes.
I enjoyed that. Yeah, and it's a piece of railroad I'm familiar with. And it's just a common theme amongst listening to your programs reinforces my decision that this market is out here. As you talk about how you believe this industry is growing, the market is growing, and the power of social media to foster that is what I'm going to depend 100% on for advertising and getting the word out there. So
yeah, those two young guys that you were talking about, John Caffarelli and Cam Neely, they pay me $1 every time I say their names. So okay, I'm going to ask you one more time for the Facebook page is
Freelance Model Railroads.
Freelance Model Railroads. Okay, I'm going to type that in while we're talking. So so now somewhere along the way, you've decided that you're going to start a company called Home Shops, and you're going to sell cars from Freelance Model Railroads.
Correct. And so I'm not sure that entirely answered the earlier question, but I saw these cars selling, and I thought, not only do I know that there's a market on there, when I see these cars, I think, and I'm not going to knock AccuRail in any way, but you have the scale of, detail, and those cars are at one level, and companies like Tangent and Athearn Genesis are at the other end of the spectrum. And for the average person who's getting into it, who might be able to pony up $1,200 or $1,500 to do a run of AccuRail cars, that's a big deal for a lot of people to be able to do that. And they're doing it primarily because they'd like to share their cars with other people, and they'd like to have a few factory quality artwork cars in their own fleet. But as I see these cars, I think, man, I sure wouldn't mind having a couple of higher quality cars of this railroad from my own collection. And so I saw these cars selling quickly, and just in my gut, I know that the market is there. So right around the beginning of the year, we do New Year's resolutions. I sent out some feelers And I sent a note to Dave Wellback with Tangent and said, I'm kind of thinking about doing this. Is it even in the realm of what Tangent would do? And by the way, if I do launch, I'm really interested in the PS 4750 covered hopper. I mean, it's just a fantastic model that's everywhere, and I'm interested in the 86-foot box car that you recently come out. I think those would be the two cars I'd like to start with. And he replied right away with, absolutely, we do this. And here's kind of a package of how this works with Tangent. And by the way, you're in luck because both cars are going to be in rotation to be ordered from the factory in 2021. But you got to move fast for the 4750s because I'd like to have that order in by the end of February. Well, as it turns out, I respond very well to deadlines and timelines. So that was all I needed to hear, that there's someone that we can do business with. And as I'd been researching the topic, of starting small businesses and how to get funding and whatnot, a lot of articles point to, for the best way to get some capital is to get a home equity line of credit, which we've been in this house for 16 years. And I looked at that and I thought, there is enough there in equity to certainly launch this company with style. Let's see if I can do it. So as soon as Tangent said, yeah, we'll do business with you, I went to my favorite two bankers here, and within a matter of 2 weeks, all that was approved. And I went back to Dave and said, okay, I've got the capital secured. I'm going to order 1,820 hopper cars. And here's what I'd like: 7 road names, 4 numbers each, 65 of each road number. And I got a message back. That said, wow, just like that. And in a few weeks, he had me in contact with Dan Kohlberg, who does a lot of his artwork. Just a fantastic two guys to be working with. And it took about a week and a half, and we have Tangent artwork for all 7 of the road names that are going to be in our first release, and the order's placed.
This is what impressed me the most, Lionel, about this guy. This is literally like somebody that's never bought a car. And I take him to the car lot and say, see there's that Ford Escape is pretty nice, or that used Taurus I think would be good for what you need. How about that fully loaded black Lincoln Navigator over there?
Yeah, he's gone right past the Focus.
I'll take that one. It's
yeah.
Like, wow. I mean, this Tangent, Tangent scale models, as you know, in the last decade has come on the scene and just basically makes, the top of the line freight cars. So it was basically disbelief when we talked about doing the podcast, and I talked about, really, you've got David at Tangent is going to do cars for you? Like, this is wow. And I'm thinking, this is going to kill me because I love collecting Tangent cars. I'm going to have one of each of these road names now. And it's like, I can't believe they're doing that. How cool. So from like a collector standpoint for me, this is such a neat thing because Tangent has just made a reputation for absolutely precise models. Everything is dead on, even among, like, if it's a Union Pacific this and they do 3 or 6 or 12 car numbers, there may be variations in lettering and details. So for them to be doing these freelance cars is such a neat thing of like, wow, there's some, cars that don't exist from a company that does nothing but absolute perfect replicas of things. So it's such an amazing thing that you got lined up.
Hang on. Can I just say, Tony, that is a great point. These are freelance cars made by a frontline, a top-of-the-line company that makes exquisite replicas of actual, railroad cars. So, I mean, these are going to turn out absolutely beautiful.
And I don't know how he did it, because I've asked David for years I want, because his car is so nice. I want those 1970s Tyco covered hoppers, the strawberry jello, the C&H sugar, the Tide laundry detergent. I've asked him for those, and what he usually does at shows is ask me to please step away from his table and set whatever models I thought I was going to take home back down and please move on. And yet this guy pulled it off. So I'm jealous as hell.
And my favorite thing to do with David Leelbach is on Saturday morning at Springfield around 10:30, after I finish helping Jim Sacco for an hour or two, I walk up to David at his booth, at the Tangent booth, with my microphone and stuck out, and I go, David, do you have a chance to do an interview right now? And he looks up at me from this crazed look of all these people trying to serve.
Well, because that's the thing with him is he doesn't, most of these companies will announce something and then it's a year or, there's that, it's coming. But he'll show up at these shows and literally open boxes. And we have a model we've never seen before. So it is Cabbage Patch Dolls in the 1980s at Target with people fighting.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I'm sorry. We see now there, Chris, Tony and I are more interested in talking than listening to you. But that's something you'll get used to as time goes by. So, okay. So you go to David Leobach, you order 1,800 cars. He goes, wow. So how do you decide which railroads you're going to do?
Well, fortunately for me, I'm working for no one but myself, and I look at roads basically from these websites or these Facebook pages, and things that as you're going through, you look at something and you think, man, I don't know what world that might exist in, or you look at something and you say, that's really cool. That looks good to me, and of course, obviously, I'm biased by what appeals to me. But I reached out to 5 people that they post stuff on there, or a couple that I know personally that also post stuff on there. And I did also do 2 of my own roads because I thought, if I am incredibly wrong about my perception of this market and I'm stuck with grain cars, I'd like to be stuck with a couple of really cool of my own grain trains. So I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from my own freelance concepts, and I think these are fantastically done cars, and I expect that when it's all said and done, I'll probably wish I had held on to more of them myself. But so I reached out to a fellow by the name of Joe Loggins, whom actually I've known since I was a kid, and we've moved around the country. But he has a freelance railroad called the Arkansas Valley. And I was first introduced to that as a young kid in New Orleans. There's a model club there, the Crescent City Model Railroad Club, and he ran a lot of his railroad equipment there. And my father and my uncles were members there, so I remember that growing up. And later, or more recently, he's created his own Arkansas Valley Facebook page, and there's someone by the name of Brian Sopke that has decided he's going to model a division of that railroad, and he's doing his own brick and mortar version of the Arkansas Valley. So there's a lot of content online, and that's my primary criteria: is that A, it's appealing, and B, that whoever owns the road is creating in one form or another a lot of online content, so that when somebody becomes introduced to the site for the first time, or to these cars for the first time, and they see an Arkansas Valley car and they want to learn more about it, well, I don't want them to search, on the interwebs and see nothing come up, right? That's going to be like, well, I don't know what that's all about. But if they go to model railroad groups freelance groups on Facebook and search for the Arkansas Valley, well, here's all this content. And that adds a lot of credibility there. The advertising for these cars and the developing of fans for these cars has actually already taken place. So I reached out to Joe Loggins and said, I'm going to do this. Would you let me offer an Arkansas Valley 4750 with the initial release? And almost instant disbelief, like, really, you're kidding, right? I mean, the excitement there it just makes the whole project that much more fun. And then there's a fella here that lives just a couple miles from me. His name is Greg McComas, whom I know very well. And he's got his own freelance railroad, the Michigan Interstate, that it is actually a brick and mortar railroad. He's got a lot packed into a room. It's very well done. And he's got Facebook groups, and he contributes to the freelance pages as well. And I said, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to launch some cars. I'm going to put some higher end freelance stuff out there. See what happens. Would you let me do a Michigan Interstate car? And right away, absolutely. He was excited about it. One of them was a little more of a harder sell. There's a fellow by the name of Daniel Archer in Kansas, and we kind of are in some social media groups together for Kansas rail fanning and such. And he had done a freelance railroad called the Archer, which generally that's a red flag for me when somebody has their railroad named just after themselves. But it was done in a tasteful way, and the wheat logo that he had on his car it was just appealing. And of course, I'm also an Archer fan on FX, so maybe that bias, that advertising was already there. But he kind of passed that off, and he came up with a new concept called the Westfalls Northern, and he's got a Facebook page specifically for that railroad, and he contributes, and it's just very tastefully done. And I reached out to him and said, "Hey, I'm doing this. Does your railroad have PS 4750s?" And he said no. So I'm going through and I'm doing some of these other cars and putting together some of these other railroads. And I'm like, I really like that Westfalls Northern concept, and these orange cars that he has on his roster are beautiful. And I reached out to him again. I said, "Are you sure your railroad doesn't have PS 4750s on the roster?" And he said no. And I asked him a third time with some pictures of the other cars that I was doing. He goes, "I'll get back to you." And the Westfalls Northern Freight Car roster was rewritten with 40 PS 4750s, in a series 21,100 through 21,139. And 4 of those will be in the Home Shop's initial release. So I'm extremely excited about that. And those Archer cars are the ones that I had mentioned. Patrick Harris just did a run of in Acura, and they're all gone, in 20 hours. And here's going to be a higher end quality car from a railroad created by the same person that did that. And there's ongoing content online. So just extremely happy about that. And then you had mentioned Matt Martin. He kind of came to me with it once he got wind of what I was doing. And he goes, I've taken over this Copper State Railway freelance operation from a fellow who created it about 10 years ago by the name of Brian Banna. And what do you think about adding that? And I thought, from a money standpoint, I had kind of only budgeted or figured I was going to spend the amount of money for 6 road names. But as I looked at it and I looked at the history, and, I've made a rail fan trip to Arizona and got to spend some time rail fanning the Copper Basin Railroad, which is loosely the inspiration for this railroad. It appealed to me right away. And so we added that to the lineup. We discussed Anthony Lorch's Kansas Pacific. I just love the logo, the Longhorn logo. And they had done some Trinity 5161 hoppers with what they have coined as the Wheat Fleet. A very large logo was on those smoother side 5161s with a wheat logo that said Wheat Fleet across it. It was just very tastefully done. And I reached out to Anthony Lorch with the Kansas Pacific, and I said, here's what I'm doing. Your railroad, I'd imagine, would have 4750s. I mean, what railroad can go to Kansas and have a grain fleet and not? What do you think about including those? And he was all about it. That one was kind of difficult because what I really wanted to do was bring that Wheat Fleet logo to life, which is much easier to do on a smooth sidecar like a Trinity 5161. And the rib side 4750 didn't really lend itself to displaying that logo tastefully without a placard. And myself and Anthony Lorch and Hank Stevens, who's involved in the imagery for that railroad, we bounced a lot of ideas back and forth, and we settled for a gray hopper with Kansas Pacific written across the middle. And on one of the right end panel is that cattle logo that I think is just you look at it and you think, I know exactly what part of the world this railroad is in. And balancing that out on the far left panel, we put a small Wheat Fleet logo. And I think it's just, that car would look perfect mined into a grain train that's got Union Pacific and Missouri Pacific and MKT cars. It would just fit right in.
This is a really neat concept.
And it's well thought out. When he gave out like the roster numbers, and again, I've seen the early work on those Kansas Pacific cars, because that's one thing I think we all get carried away, with the home road. So suddenly it's like, okay, no one would have chrome plated 4750 hoppers with red, white, and blue placards that take up half the side of the car. And yet looking at, as he said, if those were in a string of like UP and Mopac hoppers, you wouldn't bat an eye. And that to me is part of making those freelance railroads work. Because again, anybody can put their name giant on the side of a box car, and it's like, okay, yeah. But to make it blend in and seem real, that's part of the talent of it. And what I've seen, I think Chris has shared 2 or 3 of the, the early tests of what the cars will look like. And that's the thing that's impressed me is if you didn't know railroads really well, you would buy that as, oh, that's a neat railroad. Where is that? It's like, it's not real.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've been thinking. I mean, number one, the legwork that he's done creating the digital background for his own home freelance railroad, and then these other railroads, like you say, these cars you could buy. I could easily buy these cars and put them on my railroad and be quite happy with it because they're done so, as he says, proto freelance. They look like they would fit in any train anywhere in North America. And on any short line, on any Class 1 railroad, on any Class 2 railroad, they look like they'd fit anywhere, on any siding, anywhere. So, I mean, that's really kind of the cool. I'm kind of excited, Chris. Like, so is there a Home Shops website?
There is. It's homeshops.net. And of course, we're doing this way before the launch. So it's right now just a construction page, but people can go there and sign up on that homepage to join the newsletter. I'm trying to keep it with a railroad theme. So, most websites you go and sign up for newsletters. We're going to sign up for shop bulletins. And, my email address is shopforeman@homeshops.net. And
it says right here, right at this exact moment, right at this exact moment, it's 112 days, 23 hours, 9 minutes, and 10 seconds, 8 seconds. No, wait a minute. 5 seconds until the release.
This is going to be a long episode.
yeah. Oh, now it's down to 8 minutes and 57 seconds. So, okay. So, what day would that be?
Well, we haven't talked about the painting I've commissioned yet.
No, we'll get to that.
That is counting down to the anticipated date of having the painting available and ready to sell for the launch.
Okay, so we'll get to the painting in a minute because I'm getting excited the more you talk about this. And Tony, this is a fair statement, and we try to be as transparent here at the old AML as possible, right?
Oh, absolutely. You can see right through us.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Chris first, actually it was Matt Martin who approached me and said, "Hey, you ought to talk to this guy." And I'm thinking, yeah. And then I started talking to Chris briefly, and I'm like, yeah. But now, as I'm talking to you now, this is our first lengthy conversation. This is really it's a cool idea, but the reason it works so well is the amount of effort you're putting into it and how professional it looks. And my question is going to be: are you going to have on the Home Shops website? Are you going to have okay, this car, the Kansas Pacific, and then you're going to have a blurb or a link to get to the railroad, or are you going to have information about the railroads that the cars come from?
Yes, there's actually the website itself is going to have a blog on it, and I'm already writing posts on the blog that kind of mirror the Facebook posts with regards to all of these different railroads that are going to be incorporated. So I'm generating content now behind the scenes so that, I've been disappointed a lot of times when I've gone to, hey, look at my new website. This is coming, and it's got one blog post that, hey, ta-da, this is brand new, and you really don't learn much about it. So I want to make sure that when that counter hits 0 and people look at the site for the first time, there is content on there. So there will be blog posts specific to each of the road names we're doing, and they're going to have in those posts links to the Facebook pages, which of course only Facebook members can access. So that's why I'm going to incorporate on all of these roads into my Meridian Speedway website on my Railroads in Network page, where I can actually have a regular URL as well that somebody who may not be a member of Facebook can be linked to or directed to click and read there. So,
and you'll have it on the Home Shops, you'll have a URL.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And will Home Shops have a Facebook page?
Yes, it's under construction as well at the moment. It's not public right now, but
right.
It's under construction.
So roughly, when will these cars be on sale, do you think?
The timeline is once the factory in China gets the order, it can be anywhere from 8 to 12 months to turnaround time.
Okay.
So that would, in my mind, be sometime fourth quarter. I would be more comfortable giving a timeline once I have the production sample photos from the factory. From that point on, the timeline is more accurate and measurable. Of course,
yeah,
I could advertise something and the ship could end up sideways in the Suez Canal, and you just never know. That's going on right now, and there is a post on social media of that ship with somebody had circled one of the containers, and it says, "Here's your waterbed," or whatever. I looked at that and I thought, man, I'm going to have a product in the container on a ship. So I've got to be careful with advertising the timeline. But in my mind, it'll be fourth quarter that we'll actually have cars physically in hand.
What'd be fun to do, Tony, is as we get closer, is to get David Leelbach on here with Chris, and just maybe do 30 or 40 minutes talking about that whole
the whole process of doing that. Yeah. Now when you talk about the artwork, you've got 6 railroads, 2 of your own?
Seven total.
7 total. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you talked about, and I've known Dan Kohlberg for years. He's a family friend of ours, and so did he help you with the artwork, or did you take established designs from the guys' proto-freelance railroads and just port them over to the car? Like, how much did you modify things or embellish a look they had, or how'd that process go of taking these what-if railroads and making them into models?
Well, it's kind of a slightly different process for each of the roads. None of them are simple. And I actually incorporated Matthew Welke of Circuit City Design Decals into the process. And it's fantastic to work with and to help. So basically, the process begins with, of course, the railroads and the railroad owners. Most of them have already painted equipment, and most of them have already gone through Circuit City Decals, and there are vector files of the basic logo, artwork, and whatnot. Now, one of the things that drew me towards Tangent is, these guys eat, sleep, and breathe PS Pullman Standards covered hoppers, right? There is no greater library of Pullman Standard data, era specific, date specific data on cars, and that's part of the appeal to me to going to Tangent is if the car is going to have Tangent on the box, it's going to be a product that is, even though it's a freelance railroad, it's going to look like a car that could have rolled off the assembly line at that time. So basically, I went to Matthew Welke and I told him what I was doing at Circuit City Decals, and I told him that my intention is to paint up a fleet of these cars in advance, so that I can start generating a social media presence for all these roads before the cars are available. So I'm going to need decals for that. And I said, and by the way, I'd like to be able to share that artwork with Tangent, because you've got vector files, just for logo continuity. These cars that are going to be decaled and painted up need to look like the cars. They need to be accurate representations of what Tangent's going to produce. So it makes sense that the same artwork is going to be shared between the decal manufacturer and the Tangent.
All right, time out. I'm getting lost here, which is not uncommon.
So, I've noticed that as I've listened.
Absolutely, it's one of my endearing qualities that I generally have no idea what's going on. So you're making decals or decals?
I'm not going to slip like David did. I'm making decals.
Yeah, you're making decals for each one of these roads as well?
Correct.
So the decals will be available for sale for each one of these railroads that you also have cars for?
Probably not.
Oh. Why are you making decals?
Well, 100% of my advertising is going to be social media. And I need when these cars arrive and for them to be sold, that to not be the first time that my target market has seen these cars. So I'm creating what I'm calling my ambassador fleet. And I'm doing 3 to 6 cars in each road name, painting them mostly myself. A few I've contracted out. And then over the next 6 months, I'm going to send them to model railroads all over the country to pose for photographs and videos, in front of a grain elevator on this railroad or in a train on that railroad. To the earlier conversation of the website and being a virtual railroad, in the real world, these cars would float all over the country. So why not have photographs of these cars appearing on people's railroads? And I've got a few lined up already. It's going to be pretty exciting. So
this
is he's got the whole plan.
I know.
I mentioned the Lincoln Navigator. I'll be back in the third seat, and if you would please drive through White Castle sometime today and get me some burgers.
Well, it's kind of fun, and it's in my mind, this is no different than before. When somebody has, if you're going to go on a Daga cutoff, before he has an operating session, he goes, and I'm sure he stages all of his trains and prepares for that operating session. Well, launching, a couple dozen cars around the country, in my mind, is kind of the same thing. I need to have an operating session where I move 1,800 cars out of my yard, right? And before I invite all of the customers or operators to move those cars, I need to make sure that everybody knows what they're getting and what they're doing, and I want them to be excited about it. So I see this little exercise as just model railroading in a different way.
You have taken, this is exactly what I've been preaching for the last 6 or 7 years. I think it's 7 years now. This is exactly what I've been preaching for the last 7 years. Because of social media, Chris has taken the hobby almost to a whole new level of creativity by bringing social media into the hobby for himself. And, the way he's talking, it's like, this is very, very cool.
I appreciate that.
It is such a neat concept. Again, there's so much, as you say, you see all the, I have a freelance railroad. Yeah, this is what I do. But as you say, that combination of the internet and building web pages and things, that's the hobby, for you as much as actual physical models and working on things. And I think that's so exciting that, again, model railroading can just be so many things for so many people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, so have you heard of Circus City decals, Tony?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I know Matthew, and we've had stuff in Model Railroad News of his. He makes excellent decals and makes some really neat things, from like maintenance away vehicles to one of the things I ran not long ago. He did the, how as they service locomotives, you'll get mixed up doors on long hoods of diesels where suddenly, Rock Island is spelled funny, or there's a door that's Cascade green or something on a unit that's just been, the different paint stuff. You'll see orange air conditioners on, odd colored things from BNSF, for example. And he did a row of decals that are different doors that you can cut and put on existing models, so you can have that kind of mixed up look. So really intriguing and creative stuff.
Yeah.
And he does it very fast too.
Yes, always has something. The challenge usually is, what would you like to include in this month's Model Railroad News? Because there's 3 or 4 things that are really neat.
And how long has he been in existence? Do we know at all?
I'm not sure. It seems like at least 5-6 years, but probably longer than that.
So we've got to get him on here. And another guy, we got to give a tip of the hat to Matt. We got to give a tip of the hat to Matt Martin for reaching out and telling us that telling me I absolutely positively had to talk to Chris.
Well, I appreciate that. Matthew Welke, his father has his own freelance model railroad, the Wisconsin and Upper Michigan Railroad. And if you go to Facebook and search for Wisconsin and Upper Michigan Railroad, he's got a Facebook page with 1.1 thousand members. So I know Matthew's been exposed through his dad to the whole concept of freelance model railroading, probably. I would imagine. Can't speak for him all his life, or, if his dad's got a well-established freelance model railroad.
What was it called again?
Wisconsin and Upper Michigan.
Okay.
I reached out to him as well. Couldn't talk him into adding 4750s on his roster. It wasn't a fit. And I appreciate that. When we get the right car, hopefully there will be a Wisconsin and Upper Michigan.
Really? Eh? So you had some people that just weren't interested, eh?
Well, not necessarily not interested in doing it, but when you own your railroad and you toggle your variables to what do I want this railroad to look like, sometimes to add a type of car to your roster when there's not really much grain business in his world, it wasn't a good fit. And so, I to the end of, you've said that these cars, have a prototypical look to it. There's only so much push I'm going to give, and if it's not a good fit for that railroad, this particular car, I'm going to respect that, and we'll have a conversation again when I'm working with the manufacturer to do a car that might be a good fit for a particular railroad. So
you enjoy, part of this is that you enjoy creating all this on the internet and having the digital presence.
Sure.
That's a big part of the enjoyment for you.
It is, yes.
That's very, very cool. I mean, it's one of these things where it's like there's 1,000 questions to ask. So okay, so now you're hoping to release these cars in the fourth quarter of 2021. This interview is probably either probably late August or early September, so that'll work out perfect. Then we're going to have you on. We got to get you on with David Leobach, at least for 30 or 40 minutes to hear that story about how you guys work together. We'll have to send David an official AML headset so he can hear him.
Cool like me.
Yeah, exactly. And okay, so now I know you're dying to tell us about a painting, which I don't fully understand. So there's going to be a lot of me asking questions.
Good. I like questions.
That's good because I like asking them. So somehow when you and I first talked, so we did talk briefly. Chris, you can verify for the listeners out there that I don't, before we do an interview, I don't really like to talk at length with the person because I like to do all this actually on the air. So it's clean and fresh and turns out as an actual conversation. But so that's right? Like we didn't talk very long. I just wanted to check your audio and then I said, get out of here.
Nope. I think he just wanted to make sure that I was a real person. And
exactly.
That was about the extent of it.
So you briefly started to tell me about some sort of a painting that you've commissioned, and I didn't fully understand what it was you were trying to tell me, so go for it.
Well, in my mind, all of the things that we've discussed may not be enough to sell these cars. Maybe it's more than enough, but the idea popped into my head, how do I find a medium to put these particular cars on the same playing field as a prototype subject? And I've often over the years thought I'd like to commission a painting or two of, my Meridian Speedway trains, because I just think there's a lot of things in my mind that are very cool that I may never get to put in a model railroad, and certainly don't have the talent personally to draw or paint. So that idea popped into my head again as I was putting this together. How neat would it be to have a painting commissioned that would basically celebrate the initial launch of home shops? And, a freelance car will have the same attributes in a painting as would a prototype car. It's all the same canvas, the same paint, the same perspective that'll be used. So I thought, let's just see what's out there. So I reached out to one or two artists and, who weren't interested. They, told me that they thought it might be too much detail or it was the wrong era. And after one of them had told me no, I just coincidentally, I was looking at Facebook and looking at friend requests, and there was a friend request there from a fellow named Robert West. And I don't know, it had been in queue for a year and a half. I never noticed it. And I looked at that and I thought, this guy is an artist. He's a well-known artist. And I accepted that, and I sent him a note and told him what I was interested in. And a lot like Dave Welbeck, he replied right away with enthusiasm. And I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to name the company Home Shops, and I have a concern that, that may be confusing. Some people might see the name and think this is, to do kitchen repairs or redo your carpet or something like that. So I want to create a very stimulating visual image of a railroad car shop. And I'd like for in that car to be a representative of all 7 of the road names from our very initial release. So this will be a work of art that will commemorate the opening of Home Shops. And it'll be something that I can use as a banner on the website. And if you look at the current homeshops.net, in the background is a sketch, and it's actually it's very subtle and in the background, but it's actually the initial sketch he sent me of what this painting is going to look like. So the very next day, I get a note from Robert West, and he says, "By the way, I've contracted somebody, and we're going to do a photo shoot with model 4750s because I know that's important to you, so I can get the perspective on these cars just right." And when he sent me that note, I thought, I've got the right artist. I mean, he's practicing due diligence, and this is going to be a fantastic painting. And he sent me a sketch, which is fantastic. And I've got some experience in various railroad shops, so I understand how a lot of the processes work. And all of the cars are going to have employees working on them, doing something to each one of the cars in there. They're going to be in some sort of a phase of a process that would happen to a car in a car shop, be it applying an end grab iron to the top end of a car, or welding on the draft gear, or a suspended car having a set of trucks rolled underneath it. There's going to be a lot to look at. So Robert West has a pretty good Facebook presence on his own page, and once I friended him, I started getting daily, just a minute clip of Robert West. I'm here, I'm there, here goes an NS train, or this is what I'm doing. And I thought, this guy is really comfortable with social media. I wonder if he'd be interested in turning this process into like a documentary. And I asked him, what do you think about posting updates about this painting from start to finish? Again, a lot of enthusiasm all over it. So he's going to, he's already done, I think, 2, but he figures he'll do probably 20, 21, 22 posts from start to finish of what's going into making this painting. And I feel like I've hit the lottery several times with what I've done, but I mean, how do you get better advertisement than that for a new company? And once we decided we were going to go with the sketch and I signed the contract, he said, I really appreciate you investing in me and my art. I'm going to give you a chance to make that back. What about getting some very high quality lithographs that I'll sign a number and you can sell on your website? And I thought, okay, well, this now goes from being a being a marketing and advertising expense to a product development expense. And so when the painting is done and completed, I'll have 500 signed and numbered lithographs, and that'll be the first product that I'll have available to sell. And I don't want to be, out of my league or anything, but I think about as a kid looking at American Flyer painting ads and Lionel painting ads, and I can very clearly, look at the painting on an Athearn blue box of the Santa Fe -9 with an Amtrak baggage car that Trenton over, and I'm thinking to myself, a Robert West painting of the initial offering of Home Shops might be a painting that certainly maintains its value, and I can see it hanging up in any club. I can see it hanging up in anybody's workroom or office. I can see it hanging up in anybody's basement. So I'm working on that painting with Robert West. Very exciting. I just mailed him 10 cars that he's going to use also to model up 10 Tangent 4750s, and he's arranging them in the arrangement that they're going to be on the shop floor in the painting, and it's going to be a nice painting.
Gee whiz.
I mean, isn't that amazing? I can see now why I get told no to my Jell-O covered hoppers.
You didn't put up any money.
I haven't. Yeah, I have not done any of the legwork. If I had a big painting and had done all this intricate work, I think I might not have been asked to please leave. So I see now where I failed.
And Robert West, he told me, one of my specialties is I work in fluorescence, and I didn't really understand that at first, what that meant. And the very first video he posted was an introduction to his studio. And he had been contracted, he says it, so it's fair to say he had been contracted by UTLX to do a number of paintings for them. He did a lot of in-shop scenes, and he has welders with the torches glowing, and that's done in fluorescent paint. And of course, on this painting, you will have a number of people welding. We didn't talk much about the Copper State car in detail, but it does have a large metallic copper logo, the shape of Arizona on a placard. And I said, if we position that car in a specific place and have a welder working on the car next to it, you can do some magic with that metallic copper logo, and the lighting effect on it. So we're just having a lot of fun figuring out how to make, every part of this painting, something that will captivate your eye for, a minute or two.
You know what my topic for the next edition of Train Wrap is, don't you, Tony?
What's that? What's it going to be, do you think?
Home shops. That's going to be my topic.
It's an amazing. I mean, there's nothing half baked about any of this.
That's sorry, I've interrupted you, but this particular time, I feel like I need to. That is a perfect synopsis. There is nothing half baked about what this young man is doing.
Because I've seen clubs and groups, do special run cars, and it's like, oh yeah, that's neat, or oh that, wow. And I do collect those, but this guy has taken it to a level unprecedented in the hobby.
Yes. Yes, he is doing it on the same level that Tangent and those companies produce these high quality freight cars and locomotives. He's doing it on that level. Only he's doing something that's entirely different in the hobby. He's utilizing the digital world and creating a whole new segment of the hobby that really has never been tapped before to this level or to this degree of quality. Fascinating. Okay, let's get down to brass tacks here, Chris.
Yes, sir.
What are these cars going to cost?
They're going to sell for the same as a Tangent MSRP cart. So the last run of Tangent 4750s was $48.50, I think, per car.
Okay.
So we're going to sell them the same MSRP as a Tangent car. Certainly would not be fair to Tangent if, somebody who wants a Tangent 4750 to paint could get mine cheaper than his.
Oh, that's a good, okay, I understand.
Well, I can't believe they're not more. I mean, my thought would have been this is a special run deal. A lot of those that get done, they cost more because it's a smaller run. You're not, Athearn or Tangent or Atlas making all this, you don't have the artwork and all that ready at hand. So I'm amazed that they're the same price. I would expect there to be, if you just said they're $59.95, it's like, well, this is a special item. So now the fact that they're going to be at Tangent's MSRP of like the upper 40s is amazing. And then you already are lined up after the 4750s to do that spectacular, it's a Greenville 86-foot 8-door or 4-door, two per side high cube, right?
Correct. It's changed a couple of times which version, but it's actually going to be the 2-door per side version now that we do on the initial run. And that's still a work in process as far as finalizing the list of railroads that's going to be. But those will sell for the MSRP as well.
Okay, so are you going to try to do different? So as you've done this now, mm-hmm. and you've reached out to people and you've had some positive responses, are you getting unsolicited requests to be part of this?
I've only gotten a couple for the simple fact that besides the people that I'm directly involved with on specific projects, I'm not advertising it yet. So I feel like once Home Shops is officially launched and people have some cars to see what this is, I think I probably will get more requests to do their roads. But to answer your question, I'm going to try and do mostly different roads there's a whole gamut of railroads out there, and some people said, to get this started, you have to go to V&O and Utah Belt first. And I would not be opposed to having roads like that, in future Home Shops releases. But I want to test my gut of what this market is. And if I can sell a road, an entire release of cars of road names that have never been done before, that's the kind of data I need to make decisions about where to go for future runs. So, and I think they're exciting cars. I think there's some excitement to getting a car, to getting the first ever Arkansas Valley car that you can buy and plop on your railroad. I think there's going to be a lot of appeal to that.
And I think Tony also, he's going to create a buzz about these particular railroads. Like I think these individuals will find that they'll get more traffic to their pages and their websites, and there'll be a buzz about these particular railroads.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, it opens the door to so many of these roads and gives them that exposure and gets you interested both in the whole concept as well as, becoming a fan or a follower of these other proto-freelance roads.
I gotta give a shout out to Matt Martin. Hey, Matt, thanks, buddy, for steering me on to Chris. I'm very excited about this, Chris. I feel like we've discovered something that hasn't existed before, Tony.
Oh, I agree. As they say, it's something, oh yeah, everybody's got a idea for a home road, or you've heard of freelance railroads, but this is like a whole new version of it.
Yeah, and go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I think that there's a lot of the model railroading population that has access to a club layout, especially those in big cities. And, club layouts, I think, are a prime environment to put freelance cars, because a lot of clubs have their own freelance railroad that, can easily, interact with or interchange cars with, or have cars appear from another freelance road. So I think it's going to help out some of the vitality of club layouts as well.
Hey, I got an idea for a car you could do or a railroad you could do is the one that's at the Greeley Model Railroad Museum. Greeley's, the Colorado Model Railroad Museum with Michelle Kempema. They have their own private railroad. That'd be a great one to do. They'd probably love that, being part of that. There'd be all kinds of people. Once you establish this, it's going to be great to follow along and see how this goes, because once you establish this, I think you're going to get all kinds of good quality blowback of people wanting to feedback of people wanting to be part of it.
I may need to hire an employee.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand those guys over at JL Innovative, Chris Costello and his brother Michael, I think. I understand they're in the process of hiring several employees. But that's another story altogether. So with these lithographs, do you have any idea what they will sell for?
In the contract, he said I have to sell them for what a comparable lithograph of that size and quality would be, and the range is 80 to 120.
Okay. So that's not an outrageous price either, then.
I don't think so. Not when you look at Robert West has been doing paintings professionally, railroad paintings, for 47 years, and he said this is probably going to be the second most detailed painting he's ever done.
Wow. And
I'm pretty excited about that.
How many of those is he going to do now?
500.
Wow. So that's.
And he's got a printer there. He's based in Atlanta, and he's got a pipeline and a network for very high quality lithograph production. So I'll just be able to jump on that existing pipeline and hopefully bring something that's going to inspire modelers.
So do you plan on going to any train shows, or I guess really you're completely flying blind because you have no idea what kind of response you're going to get. So you're going to kind of start the website up whatever day it launches or whatever day you get it, and you're going to kind of keep people up to date when you get the cars. And just, are you doing pre-orders, or are you just going to wait and see what you get and go from there?
Well, bear in mind that we're having this interview for our listeners way in advance of the launch. So there's a couple of routes I'm considering, and I do need to talk to Dave about how I do it. One of my thoughts is once the painting is available and I have the launch event with the painting, that may still be several months before the cars are on the property. Perhaps it would be wise to actually sell the cars, kind of like Arrowhead does. One of my biggest fears is when a container comes across the ocean from China with my cars in it, it's also going to be sharing space in that container with some of the biggest competition for my cars, which is the other Tangent PS 4750s of whatever that release is. And then another thing that I have to consider, the number of projects I can do and cars I can produce between now and the time I drop dead depends upon the business model I choose. And let's just say hypothetically that to do a run like this, I would have to invest $60,000. And if I have to wait 9 months from that point in time to when I can start generating some cash flow from that, then that's 9 months I don't have any of that money back to reinvest in another order or another car, which over the course of years, that's very, very little. But I ordered quite a few Arrowhead railguns, and it was the first time I had ever actually paid for the model long before it showed up in my hands. And you know what? It was okay. When the cars were actually available, I didn't have to scramble or consider at that moment in time how I was going to pay for these cars. That was already done, and it's kind of a nice surprise for the package to show up with these cars that you might even have forgotten that you did. So I think that the burden of having that much capital tied up for 9 and 12 years, the impact that will have, if it's explained that way, might make it, to where people are comfortable paying for the cars a few months in advance. On the other hand, the market's going to dictate, what the right answer is versus the wrong answer is. But, if I pre-sell these cars, I can probably add 1 or 2 more road names to the 86-foot boxcar based on the timelines I'm looking at. So we'll see. I don't know what the right answer is. It all depends upon how the market responds. And of course, this is a conversation I'll need to have with Dave as well. You discussed his mic drop method. And there are some things about these cars that, maybe the first time ever that particular variant or version, or maybe even in the future, will be the first time a certain car is released. And he may not want that cat out of the bag before his are available. But it is a very serious or very, very, very big concern of mine having, my cars and Dave's cars be available for the first time, and somebody have to decide, well, I can afford 6 of these now. Am I going to get six whatever road name that Dave's put out, or am I going to split it 50-50 because I want some of these freelance cars? versus, all right, I've already, that came out of last month's or 2 months ago's budget. I've got the home shops cars I want, and now I'm ready for Tangent's mic drop, and I'm going to get some of his too. So I have to consider that.
I don't think I see that as a problem, because I think people that are going to want your cars are going to want your cars regardless. I mean, I don't know what Tony's thoughts are, but I kind of actually see a market for this. I actually think this is going to be a success.
I think it is because it's so unique and different, that I think that as, again, that collector standpoint, it's like, oh, I got to have one of each,
Yeah.
So I think there will be an interest there that kind of is outside the realm of, a new run of Rock Island or BNSF, hoppers. That, sure, those are interesting, but wow, did you see this?
Yeah, I think you're doing the hobby a huge favor, really, because you're not resurrecting, but proto freelance modeling, which is what I did with my Allegheny and Lackawanna Southern. I mean, that's what I enjoyed, and proto freelance modeling is a great aspect of the hobby, and certainly needs to be. Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to lead that particular segment. I mean, you're going to create. Tony, isn't he creating a whole new, I don't know, what do you call it, division of a product that really isn't out there now, like a quality car that's from a freelance home railroad that's looks like it belongs anywhere? I mean, isn't this something like I know people have done this, like he says, they've produced AccuRail cars and this and that and the next thing, but to do this with a Tangent car and to make it look as like, I don't think most people are going to care where the car come from. It just looks good.
It's neat because it's a brand doing what has been kind of hit and miss spot things of a museum or a club or someone with a home road that has something done. And again, those are just kind of, flash in the pan, or, hey, when did that get made? Or how did I miss that? Or what's this thing coming out? So the fact that this is basically going to be home shops as a brand, that's what they do, is, this is almost like those, those companies that would make convertibles when convertibles were out of production. They'd take cars, and those like Coach, I think they were called Coach companies, that would do custom versions of automobiles. That's in a way what he's doing. And, a lot of those would develop a big reputation or well known of, well, that's where you get a convertible, whatever, because it's a specialty item that isn't made right now.
Well, and I mean, if you go into the car market, I mean, Jack Roush, who's a guy, a racer, and that he's been producing Roush Mustangs and Carroll Shelby, and people producing products using another product, but producing another version of the same product. I mean,
again, it's that's how, in a way, what I see that he's kind of doing here. That he's kind of taken this, here's an established thing well, but look what I do to it, and it's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I think you should be super proud of yourself, Chris, because you're doing it with such quality and such well thought out. I mean, I honestly, to be honest with you, I didn't expect it to be this cool, and it seems like way cooler than I expected.
Well, I appreciate that. I feel like the value added that I bring to this niche of the hobby is just my personal taste and eye for what looks good, and I see a lot of it out there. As this thing grows, perhaps there'll be more personalities and tastes involved. But
yeah. As our buddy Hardpart, Kevin Hardpart Marks says, it's AML certified.
AML certified.
So I got a question for you. This is the last question, and then we'll call it a day. This question is perfect for both of you, because on the one hand, we have the editor of Model Railroad News who has his finger on the pulse of the industry. And on the other hand, we have a guy that's going to produce freelance model railroad freight cars. A lot of these companies, these manufacturing companies now, producing unpainted or undecorated models has become a thing of the past. Do we see any opportunity for people to, like, how did you get the locomotives that you've painted for your own particular prototype freelance railroad? How did you get those locomotives, Chris?
50-50 undecorated or painted.
And so what is your way of removing the paint? I mean, I'd be terrified. Some of these high end models now, I'd be terrified trying to remove the paint that comes on these things.
Well, I don't anymore. And I'll tell you, I had somebody who painted very professionally, and I went to him many years ago and asked, I did the brake fluid method to get rid of cars, the paint off of locomotives, and the alcohol method. And he looked at me and he said, "Why are you removing the paint off of these cars?" And I said, "Are these locomotives?" And I said, "Well, obviously I don't want to obscure the decal." And he goes, "Look at that model. Back in the old days when all you had were blue box models that were overpainted, and other models where it was painted, it made a difference. But if you look at what Atlas is doing today, and what Scaltrains is doing today, and what Genesis is doing today, they're investing so much in the fine detailing. They're not overpainting these models. You can see every bit of the door latch through, through the paint that they've got on there. You can see every bit of detail of the radiators because they're very fine and quality paint jobs. And I had never thought of it that way until he told me that. And other than just removing the numbers or some letters, which is very easy to do with I think there's been a lot posted on what I call the Solvaset and Scotch tape method, where you put a piece of paper towel soaked with Solvaset on the numbers for 5 minutes, and you pull that off and blot it and put Scotch tape on it, and the number comes right off. It works like a charm. I don't worry about taking the paint off of locomotives and cars anymore, because essentially it's just a primer level, and if you're not overpainting yourself and you're using a high quality model, it's not going to be overpainted in the first place. So but once I had that explained it to me like that, I've never lost sleep about taking paint off of a model since then. And that people look at my models and they cannot tell what's underneath the green and white paint.
So you just paint right over what's there.
Mm-hmm. Just paint right over.
Wow. How about that?
We've learned something.
Well, I tried the Solvaset and Scotch tape thing once, but I don't take my models out of the box, so it just rolls off the top of the box and nothing happens. So
yeah. And it works better with some manufacturers than others, but if you're just trying to take the numbers off, so you don't have that line pattern underneath there, it's most of the locomotive paint schemes, the color separations match features on the locomotive, like the frame might be a different color, or the cab may be a different color, so they're, when you really look at most painted models, there's not a whole lot of lines on a flat surface that might show through for most, most of the paint schemes.
And Tony, do you think there's any chance manufacturers are going to start producing any sort of undecorated, or is that pretty much gone by the wayside forever and ever?
No, it still happens. I know, like Intermountain, Athearn, Walthers, Atlas. I mean, it's more of a challenge locating some of them when they get announced. Don't think it's going to be sitting in a pile at a hobby shop. That no, you need to reserve, especially if you want an undeck. So definitely they're still around, but it's more of a challenge. But now, as Chris has said, maybe you should be shopping for who's got a paint scheme that's fairly. Right. How about a white KCS unit or something that's a one color that I'm just going to strip the red KCS off the side and I'm ready to go. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Just think of it as a primed model. You've already got a coat of primer on it.
And how would you get that KCS off again? Just the Solvaset and Scotch tape?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And Tangent does undecorated cars. I bought a couple of dozen undecorated 4750s from him with his last release that I'm painting into my ambassador fleet, as I call it. So they're out there. You just
right.
Look
and I think he's done both. Like, I think in his tank cars, he's done unlettered, where it's basically a black tank car with the data or the base information, and you go from there. So between kits and assembled, like one color painted releases, Tangent's always done that with most all of his tooling. So yeah, it's there. I mean, people I say, oh, you can't get. We've just named about a half dozen major companies that do. So you can. It just, again, it's a little more work than back in the blue box days when it was as common as Santa Fe or B&O.
Yeah, I think even Scaltrains has some undecorated stuff, don't they? I think so.
They've done some locomotives.
Yeah, they've done some, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, maybe we can get that, maybe we can restore that part of the hobby, because, I mean, it wasn't hard at all to buy undecorated locomotives a long time ago.
I'll tell you, I prefer decorated locomotives now, for the simple fact that people who are doing undecorated locomotives have a lot more assembly required.
And that's true. Oh, yeah.
If you've looked at an undecorated scale train's a tunnel motor, there's a lot of parts there. Versus I can get a Southern Pacific painted tunnel motor, and all you've got is the Roman letters on the side and the numbers on the cab to remove, really. And you've got a gray primered locomotive with all the detail parts applied. If it's what you're looking for. So it's kind of a double-edged sword going the undecorated route.
And that's true. Yeah, today's when I've opened some undecorated, it's kind of a shock of all the lift rings, grab irons, all these little parts. It's like, oh, that's right, they would not be on here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's less of an issue now without Flocal in the market. But when you're putting paint against naked plastic for the first time, you have that question: is it going to react with the plastic? I know there's some paints where you don't have that, but when you paint a painted model, you've already got your protective coat over the plastic.
Okay, now there's an interesting question for you, Tony. Does it matter whether the model is decorated or undecorated as to whether or not you'll open the box?
I have bought tangent kits, and a lot of them come in like they're not in a window display box, and I will buy the kit to look at how the model goes together. And that's job related. Like I remember buying one of the 86-foot high cubes and one of the little baby high cubes as kits. So you can look and see what's made of brass, what's etched metal, what's styrene. Because once it's all put together, at times it's like, well, okay, that part feels cold, so it must be made out of metal. But you don't know. So it's fun to look at some of those undecorated, unassembled. So yeah, I would guess I would probably take an undecorated model out of the box faster than a decorated one.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what about this is the last question. So what about the people, the railroads who you have used? Have they requested payment? Do they get a couple of cars? Like, how does that work?
No one has requested payment. All of them are just excited that they're going to be able to actually open up a box and see a factory painted model of their car. I will do something for them with regards to a quantity of free cars or a discount. I don't want to make a contractual commitment on the air here, but that will be taken into consideration, though. Because there is a markup. My profit margin isn't the same as Tangent's. I don't have the same numbers to play with that I wouldn't if there wasn't a middleman. But so far, everybody has just been extremely enthusiastic to be part of this project, and I think that's what's going to drive this going forward.
Yeah, sounds cool. Sounds really. I'm very, very impressed with the amount of legwork you've done and getting everything organized. And I love your website for your own railroad and all what you've done about as far as creating I love that concept of painting and creating a roster. And you don't necessarily need to do every car, but you could create for people that don't have any space but love to be part of the hobby. It's a great way to get in the hobby. You paint a few cars, some locomotives. You create a whole. I highly recommend that everybody go to meridianspeedway.weebly.com. Is that what, or are you going to change that?
I will change it. I believe meridianspeedway.net is available. Last time I looked, and I intend to change that here quickly. Definitely will need to do that before you air this episode and somebody buys it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then for your freelance division, your home shops, limited editions to find out more on the models, what's the URL to go to that?
It's homeshops.net.
Okay.
And I do call it the freelance division because I'd like to open up the door or leave the door open for diversification in the future.
Okay, so you're thinking maybe in the future you might do actual prototype cars.
I would like to see if we can go that route. Most of the prototype cars that I want to see done will never be done because they're just one, prototype for it. Specific cars that were built in the Southern Railway shops or by the IC or modified by a railroad. And kind of what I'm doing now is a litmus test, if you will. If I can develop a market that'll make any mold profitable and do it well, then that opens up the door for any car being fair game for being manufactured, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. That's I am really impressed. I hope this is a huge success so that we can continue to talk to you and follow along.
Well, I'm gonna keep this headset. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I should send you some stickers now so you can put it on the side so you'll know who sent you the headset.
Well, I'll need 2 stickers. I'll need one for the headset and one to put in my paint booth. If you peruse my postings in the freelance pages, you'll see quite a few photographs of pictures of things being painted in my paint booth, and there's lots of stickers and things in there.
Yeah, you are gonna help to resurrect freelance model railroading, which I think it's a shame that it isn't more popular as it was, because it's a great aspect of the hobby. A lot of people enjoy building their own railroads.
Well, here's how I look at it. If you relate model railroading to the film industry, right now, 99% of the modelers are prototype model railroaders, which means that's like having 99% of the films you can watch being documentaries. And I'd like to maybe give a shot in the arm to the other genres, the comedies and the dramas of the railroading world that should fit right in on the menu with documentaries.
My argument with some of the more respected modelers that are dedicated prototype modelers is when you think of your favorite movie, is it a documentary or is it a fiction? I mean, and that's where I was always at, is like my railroad was fictional, based on most good movies are based on in reality, but it's it's a fictional story. I mean, Back to the Future was all real stuff, but it's a fictional story. Which
if most people are looking for a leisurely escape from the real world, you don't do it by looking at a documentary that shows you everything that's out there in the real world. You do it by going somewhere that takes you to a different place that's more imaginative.
Man, extra marks to Matt Martin for a way to go, Matt, getting us hooked up with this guy. All right. Tony, can you give out our email address?
First, I'm thinking about my home road now, because I need a home road.
Yeah, you do. You need to start creating that.
If it's a movie genre, I think it'd probably be a science fiction comedy. So
I like it.
Well, could you at least make the last 15 minutes interesting?
I will. I'll make sure that the plane landing is better than.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like he gets into the plane. They give each other a big hug. He's like, okay, and in that Charlton Heston way, okay, honey, I think we're. And then if they'd been checking everything, and all of a sudden he realizes, oh my God, there's no hydraulics on the left side of the plane. We're going to have to circle 3 times and drop 10,000 feet each time we circle. And then we're going to have to, reverse thrust the right engines and forward thrust the left engines to get this thing even near the ground. That would have been great. But no, it was simply, he drops into the plane. Oh yeah, there's a bulb out on the dash. And he lands it with it. And then they have that lame thing where at the end he knocks over he goes down the runway and he knocks over the little signal building. And it's like,
yeah.
It's like, come on.
There were fire trucks chasing them with their sirens and lights on.
Yeah, that's because he had a hole in the plane, for crying out loud.
Man, I've got to cancel my next flight.
Well, how'd you do with Airport 77? Because they spend the whole movie underwater in the Bermuda Triangle, and then they just put balloons around the wings, lift the plane up, everybody gets off, and it sinks back down.
Well, yeah,
that's kind of,
But in the last 15 minutes, you just didn't know if they were going to get out of the plane or not.
Well, and that's true. And then the plane starts flooding, and people are trying to get, I guess it did finish up a little better.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look at these again.
Yeah.
All
right. So anyways, if you could give out our email address.
If you would like to drop us an email, you can go to amodelerslife.com and you'll see send us an email. It's a big blue square in the lower right-hand corner of the homepage. It says click on Bruce. He's always happy to get an email, though his expression in the picture may not say the same thing. And if you'd like to email us directly, modellerslife, that's modeler with 1 L, like freelance railroading.
Wow. Nice. And
at gmail.com. I almost had it. Modelerslife at gmail.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And we have a website, modelerslife.com, and you'll see all upcoming episodes and a few past episodes. We have quite a few upcoming episodes now. We're getting that all organized, and we got video page. There's some videos there, because every month I try to capsulize all the photos from the Facebook, the fans page. And if you want, and hey, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Chris, if you want a Modeler's Life t-shirt, all you have to do is go to Midwest Model Railroad, and their URL is midwestmodelrr.com, and you just scroll across the navigation bar and click on AML, and boom, you're in a wonderland of AML merchandise.
Well, I might definitely look for that. And we did not mention all the freelance swag that will be available on homeshops.net.
There you go. Freelance swag. Yeah. So So the people could get their freelance swag from you and their AML swag from Midwest Model Railroad.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Okay, Lionel, how do you think Chris is going to do on this last part, though? I mean, this is the litmus test for any guest, and so far I'm saying he's 10s all around. Even the East German judge has put up a 9, but I think this part I'm beginning to sweat a little bit here. So I guess go ahead and ask him
This is like the triple klutz.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, but I'm going to do this as an episode, so he's going to have to come up with happy rails to you at the appropriate time.
Oh, okay, all right.
I think don't you think, Tony, for our first interview with this is an episode?
I think so. Oh, yeah. So he doesn't get to do the 4 out of 5.
No, when we talk to him and David Leelbach at the same time, then we'll do that.
Oh, okay.
We'll test him on that. So at the appropriate time, Chris, you have to say happy rails to you.
Okay.
And you got to do it with enthusiasm.
Like Marilyn Monroe kind of enthusiasm?
Yeah, sure. That'd be good. Yeah. The key is no singing, no interpretation. Just say happy rails to you.
Fair enough.
All right. Let me see. Now I got to find the script. Well, Chris, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say...
Happy rails to you.
While in Busted Knuckle, guests of A Modeler's Life podcast stay at the Casa del Sol Motor Court and Inn, where late-night dancing at the Rumba Room is a magical event to be experienced.
It's another Lincoln Homer.